you share a little bit of the heart of the book, but then
Yeah.
go into what would be the first part of this kind of roadmap that God's given you?
Yeah. So just to give you a summary, before we get into the 4 things, there's a prelude, and that is the why am I burnt out to begin with?
Yeah.
What is the belief system that's perpetuating a lifestyle of burnout? Because I could get into the 6 rhythms,
Mm-hmm.
but if we don't get to the root of the belief system and where it came from to begin with, then just giving you 6 rhythms to practice isn't actually going to prevent you from burnout, because you're going to keep defaulting to old patterns, old belief systems that are more than likely rooted in trauma. And so we got to tweak those belief systems first, and then we get into the rhythms and can really make a difference at that point.
Yeah. Among young Christian leaders, what do you feel like are common roots that they kind of have to address? And you said kind of can stem from trauma, but are there some common themes you've seen?
Yeah, I think of one prominent leader that I had an on-air counseling session with who grew up in a chaotic family environment. There's a lot of chaos. Mm-hmm. And it was his job to diffuse the chaos. Yeah, it was his job to put his needs on the back burner and diffuse the chaos. And guess what? When he went into ministry later on, he was drawn to chaotic environments, put his needs on the back burner, focus on fixing the chaotic ministry situation. It's the same role, but in a Christian way, you know?
Yeah, that's maybe me.
I hope not, but I don't know. Maybe it is.
Well, gosh, I'm not going to share my family's business, but even just yesterday, I got a pretty big call. And I literally was just talking to my wife, where she's the oldest of 3 girls. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. And of course, not always, but generally the oldest kind of do feel this
the responsibility. Yeah.
And so we've always been kind of sometimes clash of the titans because of that, independence, but also powerhouse when God is, we're at our best. And,
I agree.
And get to do that. But just the call I got, I was like, man, I feel like we're often getting pulled, whether it's your family or my family.
Right.
There is a pressure sometimes where we want to do so much to try to help, and we've gotten the privilege to be that role as well. Right. And just how to learn the balance of that. Yeah,
it's funny. I'm doing a special podcast series for Soul Care where people call in for on-air counseling sessions in different areas of these rhythms that they're struggling with.
Yeah.
And the majority of the callers, as well as the people who applied to be on the podcast, firstborns.
Huh.
I found it fascinating. Huh. It's like the good kids that are responsible. They're there for everybody else. Let me do it. Help me, I'll fill in the gaps. What do you need? But we're also the best at neglecting our own souls. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to be said of that. I'm a firstborn too, so is my husband.
Yeah. What are some lessons of healing in that area and leaning into the gift of it that you've kind of discovered?
Well, again, it's all in the balance. You first of all, I think there's a humility in acknowledging that we can't do it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's a hint of pride in thinking that we can, and we're the only ones that can, and we're the best at it. Even though we've had that role in different seasons, but I also feel like we miss out on reliance on the Lord when we become so self-sufficient, so self-reliant as firstborns. And so soul care is also our act of acknowledging we're limited, we're finite, we have limited capacity, and we need the help of Jesus to fill up and stay filled. So there's honestly a lesson of humility in there wrapped up for me.
Yeah. Is there anything else you'd want to share, whether it's a couple other common themes, like you just talked about the firstborn, you talked about you're seeing among young Christian leaders, sometimes there is a commonality of them being a diffuser kind of in their family, a peacemaker. Is there any other profiles that are kind of common? Most of this audience is trying to speak to young Christians.
I would
just
say the Christian theme has usually been the opposite of this, which is care for everybody else. Don't say no. There's so much ministry. Go, go, go. Do as much as you can for Jesus. So this is a little bit countercultural, I think. Christian culture doesn't always promote a healthy, filled, rested self.
Yeah.
But Jesus does. That's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing. When you unpack his life as, through the lens of soul care, that's my focus was the 6 rhythms that Jesus practiced.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not making this stuff up. I'm watching him be so balanced and so healthy and wanting the same for us as a church.
Yeah. That's cool. So I'm sure you like read the Gospels almost in a new way as you're
Totally.
almost
Before,
like
after, during. My eyes were open to things I had never seen before, which I'm sure I'll mention a couple of them.
Okay. Yeah. What was the first one that really stood out? That was a rhythm you saw Jesus doing.
The rhythm of savor, of just being present and savoring life. And there's a specific verse that comes to mind. Matthew 13, verse 1. It says, Jesus left the house and went and sat by the lake. Period.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Like, wait a second. Why did I never see that before?
Yeah.
And the rhythm of just savoring life. I just imagine him sitting by the lake and just enjoying it and connecting with God in that moment. And now, of course, people found him and a crowd gathered around him. And that's when he goes into the parable of the sower. But even that, I think, is significant. But just little verses like that popped up throughout that was just really life-changing for me, too.
Are there any markers of savoring that come to mind for you? Like if or any young person's kind of saying, hey, I mean, I don't think I savor the moments. I don't think I savor people.
Yeah.
They're in my presence. How do I want to like be more present, but is there anything like, hey, you're savoring when you think this way or you feel this way?
Well, the things that prevent us from savoring are often thoughts of the future. Yeah. Or regrets from the past. It's either the worries about tomorrow or the regrets of what's happened, reprocessing. I wish I wouldn't have done that. And I think we can really assess our level of presence when we're in the present, when we're able to be right here in this moment, right now, talking to you, not thinking about what I'm going to say, not thinking about what I already said, but just right here. In this moment. God is in this moment. We are in this moment. And I also think having a heart of gratitude, one of the practices I talk about in Savor is the practice of gratitude. And not just thank you, God, for my day, thank you for my family, but being so specific to be aware of what God has given me right here and right now. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that gratitude is rebellion against the pain, against the hardships, against the darkness. And it tethers us to what's happening here and now as we call it out. So honestly, this is a muscle, okay? This is not something that we just are good at. In soul care, I actually have a mindfulness activity to help you learn to be in the present, to clear your mind, to focus on what you're smelling, tasting, touching, seeing, hearing, and I pair each one of those with a Bible verse to just like fix our attention on God, but also be really aware of what's happening around us. Sometimes the most holy moments are literally right here and right now.
Mm-hmm. I love the phrase gratitude is a rebellion. I honestly, even that will probably stick with me because I think a lot of people feel like they have warranted reasons to be concerned or worried, or especially I tell a lot of sometimes like parents or grandparents to the older generation, like, hey, I know this may be true when you guys say things like, I've never seen the world like this before. Or they'll say things like, I've never seen it as divided as right now. Or this is a thing that a lot of people say. I don't know if you've heard people say this, but something like, oh, I'm so thankful I did not have to raise kids in this generation, or like in this world today. And I know that's honest, and they really are from information that they have and things that they're constantly seeing. They're saying that out of honesty, but when young people hear that, it's like, man, that just creates more anxiety because you're like, hey, we do have to raise kids in this generation and lead in these times. And so it is rebellious to see all these warranted reasons to kind of have fear or doubt or concern for the future. But then you're like rebelliously deciding I'm going to find gratitude. I think that language is almost necessary because it is, like you said, a muscle. It takes work to find the gratitude when the world, and I would say even Christians often can find themselves very concerned.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as the topic of soul care, the different rhythms that Jesus practiced to care for his soul, I think if I compared my muscle strengthening to your muscle strengthening, if I were to ask you to look at your bucket of fullness and see where it's leaking, your answer would be different than my answer. Even though there's 6 rhythms, we have different ones that we're strong in and different ones that we're weak in. Some people might be weak in all 6 of them. But I would say savor was the one for me personally.
Yeah.
Because I'm type A, I'm driven, I'm a firstborn, I get things done. Like we just talked about 7 books. But Jesus' calling for me was to just be present, connect with me, enjoy life. This moment is all that matters, and us in it, And so it was just, I told you earlier that I wrote this book in 16 days, and I say that not to brag. I say that to show you that this was literally God's gift for me. He's like, this is for you first. And I think that's the beauty of writing. You asked me earlier, how do I narrow down what I'm going to write? I think that would be the answer as far as like what's for you, because I need to receive it and live it in order to give it. Yeah. And so, soul care was for me first. Yeah.
Kind of like a fruit of being present with God.
Yeah.
What would you say is the second part? So we savor, another rhythm that you found ease to doing.
Another one that is special, I think, and we could use more of it in the church, is protect. And that's the rhythm of healthy boundaries.
Yeah, that's good.
Like when we think of Jesus, I think many people assume that he was a yes man, said a lot of yeses to a lot of people. But when you actually study his life, he said a lot of no and not now. And he was so clear on his calling that it was easy for him to say no to other callings. It's like he knew what the Father had called him to do. So if somebody else was calling him to do it, he wasn't going to get distracted. He wasn't motivated by the obligation of man. And I see so much of that in the church. So much obligation, so much guilt. People feeling like they need to say yes to everything and everyone. But like you said earlier, when you say yes to A, B, and C, you don't have any time, energy for D. So you say yes to one thing, you're automatically saying no to something else. So we have to know our calling. We have to know our priorities and be able to ruthlessly say no to the things that don't align with that calling.
It's good. Right away, I got 2 questions. I feel like there's almost like blurred lines for many Christians where we want to earnestly pursue God and be a cup that can overflow and help other people's lives. But there's kind of blurred lines of when is it a boundary, and then when is it just selfish, and then also when do we call it to sacrifice? Because it seems like we are supposed to feel spent, like for His glory, and the disciples and a lot of God's followers did hard things, and I've always had a hard time. Was like, where is that line where it's like, no, it's going to be hard, and then also no, there needs to be a boundary, or no, you're being selfish. And I guess going back to you talking about Jesus being very clear with his boundaries, I've always seen Jesus as where I respect so much of how he carries himself, and even as a Christian leader, it's easy to not do this as be interruptible. Like he's constantly interrupted. And I just never noticed that for like the first half of my whole faith journey. And then have started seeing that more of like, I think I might have been when like there's the Samaritan, I don't know if Good Samaritan, is that I could see myself sometimes being like one of those religious leaders that's like,
right.
It's not that I don't want to help. I have a commitment already made here. And so how do you kind of differentiate with that?
Well, one thing you said that I'd push back on is that we're supposed to be spent. I don't think that's the truth.
Yeah.
And I don't think Jesus was ever spent. I think he always had something left in his tank. I think he always had margin so that when those people came by, he had margin.
Yeah.
When they needed something, he had margin. And when he was getting close to spent, guess what he did? He protected his time and said, I'm out. I'm going to go withdraw. That's why I said Jesus withdrew often.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I'm not going to let myself get spent. I have work to do. And in order for me to do this work, I have to stay filled. So if he was feeling close to E, that's when he would withdraw to lonely places and be with the Father and fill up so that he wouldn't get spent. And I think that's the difference, is we do have this false belief that we're supposed to be spent. But I think when we feel spent, we've probably ignored a signal that we were supposed to respond to, a signal of frustration, apathy, fatigue, irritability, all of these things that start creeping up when we're not at our best, when we're spent. But those are signals. God's like, pay attention and go fill yourself up so you can do a better job as a husband, as a dad, as a minister, as a counselor, as an author, whatever it is. But I guess I struggle to believe that we're supposed to be spent. And I believe that Jesus was intentionally staying filled with all these practices. He protected his time, went away with the Father. He said no. Rest. He took the time to stop. The Bible tells us he was wearied with his journey. So what did he do? He stopped. After a long day of ministry, what did he do? He got on a boat, was like, peace out, I'm taking a nap. It is time to rest. I know y'all need me right now, but I have human capacity. I'm going to honor that. When I honor my capacity, I'm honoring the God who made my capacity. I'm honoring God by saying, I sleep while you work. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Again, there's that humility piece again, and you realize the world still goes on without you. But I understand what you're saying with selfishness. And I think when we work hard to have margin and not get spent, we can function out of our overflow rather than our emptiness, rather than our scarcity. When I'm filled, I'm a much better mom. I'm a much better wife. I'm a much better counselor to the people that I'm pouring out for. When I get to a place where I'm nearing E, it feels different, So it's just something for us to be acutely aware of. And even throughout the day, like the first question I ask you in soul care is, how full do you feel? 0 to 10. 10 is I feel filled to overflowing. 0 is I've got nothing left in the tank. And I think it's not an assessment that we just take once. I think it's an assessment that we need to take regularly to take inventory of our level of fullness so that we can respond and do something about it.
Debra, do you feel like you are helping a lot of people that have bad ideas but good intentions? Because I think of me talking about being spent, which I've heard from some pretty prominent leaders. And I very quickly, I'm like, yeah, you're right. But for like almost 20 years of my faith, that's been a perception, and it's good intentions. It's just a little off. It's like, oh, you go in the right direction. Just this last 25% can make like 100% difference. In
You're
your life
absolutely right. It's those little things, again, the belief systems that we're really getting to the root of. Is this actually a belief system that's rooted in truth?
Yeah.
Or is it laced with a little bit of my trauma? Laced with a little bit of my childhood, laced with a little bit of my dad's voice, laced with a little bit of my parents' dysfunction, laced with a little bit of my pastor's dysfunction, right? Or is it actually aligned to God's truth? Because when we get it lined up, and nobody's perfect at this, we're all a work in progress, but just being aware of those underlying belief systems, because they are what influence us to act a certain way and do what we do, Yeah. When Jesus says that he came to give us life abundant, other translations talk about a filled life to its full. Yeah. And I love the idea of that, the overflow. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overfloweth. It's not on E, it's overflowing. And to me, that is the epitome of a Christian life, not overflowing with the blessings of this world, but overflowing with health, overflowing with the Spirit, overflowing with the fruit of the Spirit, overflowing with the fullness of the Spirit of God. That's the kind of life I want to live. And don't get me wrong, it's not like there haven't been seasons in my life of burnout. You know, I just think about when I had 2 kids under 20 months old and I was writing my first book, and my husband was a medical school student finishing up residency, working 100 hours a week. You know, our young family trying to juggle this hard new season.
Yeah.
And feeling tired, feeling fatigued, feeling burned out. The difference is when you feel burnout, you either see it as a sign and a signal and you do something about it, or you just see it as a weakness and you push through.
Yeah.
And then you get back into that cycle over and over and over. If burnout is a season, that's one thing. But if burnout becomes a pattern, that's a whole other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we want to address with soul care, is that we don't allow burnout to be the pattern. We allow fullness to be the pattern.
Yeah. If you were to tell someone who's like, I don't know if it's a season or a pattern, and maybe you were to say, hey, something to the effect of like, hey, you're lying to yourself if you think, is there any answer to that of like, how do they know? I think sometimes we do not even want to push through. We feel like we have to push through because of commitments we've already made. So we'll lie to ourselves and say, it is probably a season, because we often do. I think it's human generally to have a date in mind, because we'll think, because once I do this, I have to, as much as I want to withdraw or want to do,
Right.
I have to get to that date. And once I get to that date, I will slow things down. I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many times I've talked to friends and they're like, hey, we're so busy now, we can't help, or we can't connect now, or
Right.
we want to hang out. But once I get to this time, then we free up.
Yeah.
And
Well, I guess the question is, have you ever said it before? And if the answer is yes, I have said this before,
mm-hmm.
then it's a pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Oh, yeah. It's just now the date has moved.
Yeah.
Once I get to this date, once I get to this project, I'll stop feeling so burnt out. Once I do this, I'll be able to prioritize my health, my family, my soul, my mental health, my emotional health. If I find myself constantly saying that, it's a pattern,
Mm-hmm.
right? This isn't a once and done conversation.
Yeah.
It's not a short season. It's a lifestyle.
Yeah. And I don't know if you'd have a rule for this. So would you say, though, then believers, technically, that shouldn't be like part of our vocabulary much? Like, we don't live towards dates that will free up. If that's happening too much, like, something's got to really overhaul.
Yeah, I would say yes. If that's happening too much, that's a sign that there is something going on underneath the surface of your life, rooted in some sort of unhealthy belief system that needs to change. Unless you're waiting to hit the wall, unless you're waiting to break down and burn out and move into extremely unhealthy territory. And that's the unfortunate role that I also have, seeing people who have crashed. I worked with a senior pastor of a really thriving church who hit a very low point, to the point where he came into my office and was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. I have no desire. But your church is doing amazing and there's so many people getting saved. I don't care. I'm done. And he was so burnt out because he had never learned to care for himself. He'd never learned to care for his soul. And digging into his childhood, he was in an abusive home with an abusive stepdad. And in that family, it was my way or the highway with the stepdad. You don't do anything wrong. I expect perfection from you. Mm-hmm. And he lived to please his stepfather. So years later, he gets radically saved. He's no longer under the abuse of his stepfather, but now he's abusing himself. He's perpetuating the pattern of abuse of, I have to do everything just right for everyone. I have to make sure I please all of these people. Mm-hmm. You can't sustain that kind of a life, you know? And sure enough, he got to a point of reliving these roles, but in a Christian way. I'm in ministry now, but I'm still self-neglecting. I'm still self-sabotaging. Yeah. I'm still self-abusing, until he realized the importance of stopping and getting to the roots of his belief systems, tweaking some of those things and starting to live life very differently.
That's good. Yeah. There's a quote I've quoted a couple times on here that has just stood out because I see it a lot of Richard Rohr said something to the effect of, whatever is not transformed is transmitted. Mm-hmm. And when you said that his stepfather he lived to please his stepfather, then It's like, unfortunately, we often didn't find a relationship with the Father, but
Yes.
apply the rules of the old, like our other parents, or the trauma from that, to a God that's not maybe asking that of us. Well, you mentioned the word rest. Is that the third one that you saw?
Yeah,
Jesus
rest
doing a lot?
is one of the most important rhythms because we literally need sleep or we die,
Yeah.
right? Like we need to rest. And I think it's become trendy not to rest. Like I've heard people say, yeah, I only need 4 hours of sleep,
That's true. Yeah.
But again, there is a breaking point. And your optimum brain functioning is 7 to 9 hours of sleep. When you're not sleeping, it affects your mood. It affects your physical health. I mean, you can literally have physical health issues come up because of a lack of sleep. You could have mental and emotional health pop up, come up to the surface that haven't been there before after a season of lack of sleep. And so I take this very seriously, not just sleep, of course, as a practice, learning to sleep, learning to have healthy sleep hygiene, learning to turn off the screens and sleep when we need to, but also living a life of rest, not just a life that's go, 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 go. I often talk to my clients, I call it the 85% rule. And in soul care, I talk about how I encourage clients to live at 85% with their schedule, live at 85%, not 100%. And it sounds kind of like, well, aren't we supposed to like do our best, like live at 100%?
Yeah.
But if you think about it the same way you think of budget, you don't spend 100% of your paycheck.
Right.
And you shouldn't, right? You need to set aside some margin. It needs to be the same as we look at our schedule, look at our life, 85%. When I was digging into God's word, and of course, Sabbath rest came up, that's something a lot of people talk about. But I took the statistics, 1 day of rest out of 7 comes out to an 85% work week. So that number was really significant for me because I've been talking about 85%, but it was really cool to see that 1 out of 7 days is actually 85%. So I think there's something there that God knows about our human capacity that we just we're not convinced yet,
Yeah, I think it goes to the not being spent thing as well, where I also talked about Jesus being interruptible. Is if you have the margin, you can be interruptible. But
right.
if you got a full schedule, it's hard to be. Okay, I'm going to ask you something that is timely, I guess somewhat personal, but I'm excited because I've never got to. It's a new idea that I just learned, and me and my wife have like a borderline adopted. I hear her quote this concept all the time, so it's really infiltrated our home in a good way. Is we're with Carrie Newhoff and Tony Newhoff to do a marriage retreat, and he wrote a book, Carrie did, called At Your Best, and it kind of helps you identify your red zone, your yellow zone, and your green zone. And the concept is like you kind of know, hey, I get some of my best work done, and focus work done at certain times. Everyone's different, but we kind of had a chart from like, let's say 5 a.m. till 12 at night, and just I made it, and my wife Cheyenne made it, where it's like, here's my green zone, here's my red zone, and for her, she starts out in her red zone, she then goes to yellow, and then she gets into her green until I think around 1ish.
Okay.
For me, I actually start pretty quickly into my green zone. Like I wake up
Hit
and
the ground
until about like 10 a.m. maybe, then it hits the yellow, and it's definitely like red around 3 p.m. But I get she doesn't have another green zone. She has a longer green zone than I do, and it's during the day. I do get another green zone, and I feel like I've met a lot of my closer that are guys. They have a green zone at night, and that becomes a challenge because they want to stay up. The wife wants to go to sleep, and that becomes a whole conversation. My question for you is, if that concept is true, and which I would just say for me, I do find a second wind at night. However, I feel this conviction a lot lately that I've got to go to bed earlier if I want the life that I really want to have, waking up in the morning and abiding and savoring God and putting those boundaries. But I've been in the last 3 weeks really trying to think through, how do I but this is probably when if I've written before or done certain work, I do some of the best work then past 10. But if I do again, there's like, I just feel like I'm at too good intentions running into each other, and it's definitely not working what I'm currently doing.
I'd be curious if before your second wind, your second green zone, if there's anything that you do that might be contributing to a second green zone.
A green zone.
Like I'm imagining your tank going down, 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 and something giving you a little bit of a boost before the end of the day.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I think it is turning off maybe a little bit, and go on walks a lot, pretty consistently around that time. And yeah, I think that's a great revealing question of a couple of things that maybe are actually triggering.
Because it makes me wonder, can we actually turn certain times into green zones depending on what we do before, depending on how assessing our level of inventory and then doing something about it. You mentioned walks. One of the rhythms in soul care is nourish. And it talks about taking care of your body, your physical temple, through hydration, nutrition, and movement. In analyzing Jesus's life, experts believe he walked 40,000 steps a day. Okay. Which I'm like, man, that blows my 10,000 steps out of the water.
Yeah, that's crazy.
To go, that was our primary mode of transportation, is walking. But we know that walking increases serotonin and dopamine, the chemicals responsible for a good mood, for sharp thinking, for creativity. So without you even realizing, maybe that little walk actually goes a long way in filling you up and getting you to a healthier place. So I think I like that concept of red, yellow, and green zone. And I wonder if even adding a couple questions of like, what's the prelude to a green zone? A good night's sleep, a power nap, a walk, time in God's word, some time away, some alone time. What could that look like for you to cultivate a green zone by thinking ahead and planning ahead?
No, I think you got me thinking. And I think another one is, I can tell my brain, it's like right after work, 5 o'clock to 7 or 8, and then the green zone comes. But I think I mentally give myself permission of, I'm not constantly trying to think of what to do.
Yeah,
I'm not
you're detached mentally.
Yeah, I'm like, hey, full permission to like, you were spent.
Yeah,
So now
here's that word again, Grant.
So now you can like, just whatever you kind of would like to do, or try to connect with your wife, and just things that are a little bit slower. But it is a maybe something in my brain that's constantly thinking like, oh, I want to make the best use of time for the days that are evil. So I'm like thinking of stuff to do, but I then am thinking more of the times that's going to connect me with God or with her.
Right. And those are filling times, connecting with God, connecting with your spouse. So maybe we'll lead into the fourth rhythm of connect. Life-giving relationships, relationships that are focused on give and take are life-giving, versus relationships that are just focused on give.
That's really good.
Are not life-taking, or not life-giving. They're life-taking, right?
Yeah.
You're just giving. But life-giving relationships. Jesus, before he chose his disciples, he was so intentional about spending a night in prayer and then inviting these people into his life. I'm sure everybody wanted to rub elbows with Jesus at some point, right? But he was very intentional in knowing, these are my people. And not only that, he invested in them, but he also expected from them. He asked a lot of them, hey, go prepare this or that. Prepare the Passover meal for me. Go get this. Go do that for me. I need you to stay up with me and pray. Like, he didn't just give, he also asked to receive from them. And he was God, fully God. But to me, that models the beauty of life-giving relationships, and just makes me take inventory of those relationships. How much am I investing in those relationships? Because I need those relationships to fill me up as well. And we live in a really lonely culture. Like the studies I did for soul care showed me that people have a higher mortality rate when they're lonely, higher than smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. There's higher mortality rate at the end of life for those who feel lonely, perpetual loneliness, more than smokers. I mean, we're not seeing that advertised. And we live in such a connected but disconnected culture, you know? Like, I'm not talking about how many followers do you have on Instagram. I'm talking about life-giving relationships. And so I think that's a really important part of soul care that we can't neglect.
Yeah. I like, it's so simple, but yeah, you can stumble into seasons where you're like, wow, I don't have
I'm too busy for it.
relationships.
Yeah.
Or just like, I like the idea of, you said, like an audit of sorts of like, how much time do I have relationships where I'm giving, and that's good, that's fine. But I think of a friend right now they're in the loneliest time I've ever seen him. This guy's the least likely to be marked by lonely in all 10 years of me knowing him. And one thing he just recently said is, I'm seeing, he's kind of thinking about potentially moving here. And part of why is like, I feel like in our season right now, a lot of people have moved who were key people who get poured back into a relationship. And now all I have are relationships where I'm kind of pouring into them. And it's so great when we finally get together because it's mutually beneficial relationship. Is there any distinctions or direction you'd give? Because there's kind of like mutually beneficial because we're around the same age, stage of life. And then there's like mentors. For them, that's kind of life giving. Taking.
Yeah, well, that's the truth. There's 3 types of relationships. And I would say that the mentor relationship is someone pouring into you without the expectation of returning that.
Yeah.
And we balance that out with discipleship relationships where I know I'm called to pour into you without the expectation of anything back. I think the problem in ministry is we often have more discipleship relationships than peer relationships where I'm pouring into you and you're pouring into me. Yeah. And we feel like that's how our relationships are supposed to be because we're in ministry, we're pouring out here and there and everywhere. But we have limited capacity. We have to find places where we're filling up, and we have to have relationships that are filling us up as well. I think that's a really important part of iron sharpens iron. So look for that in your life and not just have them, but invest in them, you know?
Is there any direction you'd give to, especially pastors? I do think, I don't want to say they have it the hardest, but they have a unique hurdle in that many times pastors want more mutually beneficial relationships in their church, but they do wear the hat of like the leader in a sense, and so they feel like there's a lot of pastors I know that have some of their better relationships or unique relationships, at least, and vulnerable relationships outside of their church.
Yeah, and I think that's a wise way to go. Okay. Because it's hard to find peers. It's hard to find other connections with the people that you're pouring into and shepherding. In a similar way that I wouldn't necessarily look to my clients to be my friends, but I'm looking for people outside of the ones that I'm pouring into. And I think that's really wise. I do think sometimes in church leadership and in leadership in general, you do find people who are iron sharpens iron kind of friends, but it can get sticky depending on your role. If you're the boss or if you're, in charge of their paycheck or whatever, it can get sticky. But I do love the idea of pastors and leaders not being at the top of their totem pole and making sure they have a mentor that's pouring into them as well as like-minded peers. I unfortunately see too many pastors who come into the counseling office and they don't know where to go next. They don't know what to do when they're struggling. They don't have anyone to turn to. And I am so grateful and honored and privileged to have that role in helping people in leadership. But it would be so amazing and such an important part of their life to establish those specific connections in their own worlds as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, yeah, any more encouragement around the book? And I know you have 2 more, so it gives more reason to pick it up. But any other encouragement, and just anyone who's listening, who's kind of like, man, you're speaking to me right now.
Yeah, well, like I said, Soul Care unpacks the 6 rhythms that Jesus practiced to care for his soul and how we can do the same. And if you're wondering, like, which rhythm am I weakest in, I actually have a quiz that I put together myself from my experience as a counselor. The website is debrafileta.com/soulcarequiz. And it's a free quiz, and you answer a series of questions, and it'll help you pinpoint your specific area of weakness of which of the 6 rhythms that you need to start with. But as far as the book goes, you can buy it anywhere books are sold, and you can connect with me. The easiest way to connect with me is Instagram at Debra Fileta. I love interacting with people. I am the one that mans my Instagram and messages, and I love meeting people and interacting and hearing what God's doing across the country.